Pirates. The word alone conjures 1,000 images. Black flags snapping in the wind, swords flashing in the sun, barrels of rum rolling across creaking decks. In the movies, they're charming rogues with perfect timing and improbable balance, dancing through battles with witty one-liners. The truth? Well, it's more splinters, salt sores, and stale biscuits than swashbuckling. Real pirates were survivors, opportunists, and sometimes accidental revolutionaries. They lived on the edge of starvation and violence, driven by hunger, greed, and the promise of freedom. And for a brief period in the late 17th and early 18th centuries, they ruled the seas in what became known as the Golden Age of Piracy. This is the story of those pirates. Not the ones in fairy tales, but the real men and women who risked everything on the high seas. From their origins to their weapons, their strange beliefs to their legendary deaths, and finally, the myths they left behind. So, grab your cutlass and mind your step. This deck's a slippery one. We're setting sail. If you close your eyes and picture a pirate, chances are your mind pulls from the same treasure chest of images we've all been fed. A man with a tricorn hat tilted rakishly over one eye, a gleaming cutlass at his hip, a parrot perched on his shoulder, and, because Hollywood can't resist, perfectly timed sarcastic remarks between sips of rum. He's probably on a spotless ship, his boots polished, his hair windswept in a way that suggests he's had a personal stylist on board. Now, wipe that from your mind, because while pirates did have moments of theatrical flair, the real ones smelled like sweat, gunpowder, and bilge water. Their ships creaked, leaked, and groaned. Their hair was often tangled with salt, their teeth were in various stages of mutiny, and their boots, if they even had them, were caked with a mix of mud, tar, and the unmentionable grime of life at sea. And yet, these rough-edged, salt-stained men and women are some of the most enduring figures in history. So where do they come from? The answer: as long as people have sailed with valuable cargo, someone else has tried to steal it. The act of piracy is as old as seafaring itself. Ancient Egyptian records mention sea raiders attacking trade ships in the Mediterranean as far back as the 14th century BCE. The Greeks knew them. The Romans fought them. The Vikings perfected the art of seaborne plunder in the chilly waters of northern Europe. But the pirates most people think of, the ones with Caribbean sunsets and barrels of stolen rum, belong to a very specific time and place. The so-called Golden Age of Piracy, roughly 1650 to 1730. A perfect storm for piracy. Why then? Why the late 17th and early 18th centuries? History doesn't just produce pirates on a whim. It has to bake the perfect recipe. Trade routes worth robbing. By this period, European empires had colonies scattered across the Americas, West Africa, and Asia. Ships carried gold, silver, sugar, tobacco, spices, and luxury goods. Each voyage was a floating fortune. Naval bottlenecks. European powers were often at war with each other. Their navies were stretched thin, focused on protecting fleets near home, leaving distant colonial waters under-patrolled. Disgruntled sailors. The merchant and naval service was brutal. Low pay, poor food, and a captain's unquestioned authority meant sailors were essentially trapped in floating prisons. When peace treaties reduced the need for warships, thousands of armed, angry, and unemployed sailors suddenly had the same idea. Why not take ships for ourselves? Add a dash of weak colonial governance, sprinkle in some lawless frontier ports, and you've got an ocean-wide buffet for anyone bold or desperate enough to grab a plate. From privateers to pirates, one of history's trickiest pirate loopholes was the role of privateers. Privateers were essentially government-licensed pirates. They carried a letter of marque that allowed them to attack ships belonging to enemy nations. It was war by subcontract. The arrangement was mutually beneficial. The Crown got extra naval firepower without paying for it, and the privateers got to keep a cut of whatever they captured. The trouble came when wars ended. A privateer with a fast ship, a loyal crew, and a taste for plunder didn't always hang up his cutlass just because two kings had shaken hands. Many simply carried on raiding, no longer bothering with the paperwork. To the authorities, they were now criminals. To themselves, they were doing the same job as before, just with a slightly looser dress code. Myths that refuse to die. Before we go further, let's deal with some stubborn myths. The buried treasure. Thanks, Robert Louis Stevenson, but pirates rarely buried treasure. Most loot was sold or traded quickly. Gold and jewels were actually rare finds. The treasure was often barrels of sugar, bales of cloth, tobacco, or rum, all of which spoiled or lost value if left underground. The walking the plank. Sorry to ruin the drama, but there's little historical evidence pirates actually used this as punishment. More common methods included marooning someone on a deserted island with minimal supplies, or simply tossing them overboard. The plank was more theater than reality. The parrots, exotic birds, were indeed traded in the Caribbean, and a pirate might have one as a novelty pet, but the idea that every pirate kept a parrot on his shoulder is pure romanticism. A parrot on a crowded, chaotic deck was more likely to get eaten than pampered. Our accent, that gruff West Country English accent we associate with pirates, owes more to 20th century actors than actual history. Pirates came from all over: England, Ireland, Scotland, France, Holland, Africa, the Caribbean, and beyond. A real pirate deck would have been a multilingual chaos of curses, commands, and complaints. Setting sail. For many pirates, the first voyage began as an act of opportunity rather than a grand life plan. You were a sailor stuck on a merchant ship crawling with cockroaches, hauling sugar to some colonial port, when suddenly a black flag appeared on the horizon. Your captain might order you to fight, but in reality, most merchant crews weren't paid enough to die for the cargo. If the pirates offered you a chance to join, better pay, a vote in decisions, and no lashings for minor mistakes, it was tempting. Very tempting. Once aboard a pirate ship, you entered a world both harsher and, in some strange ways, fairer than life in the Navy. Discipline existed, but it was enforced by agreed-upon rules called articles, and captains were often elected. Everyone knew the risks. Capture could mean the gallows, but the rewards were immediate and, for many, worth it. The first voyage could be a rude awakening. There was no magical transformation from weary sailor to swashbuckling hero. The work was still backbreaking: hauling sails, scrubbing decks, manning cannons. The difference was that now you did it for yourself and your shipmates, not for some faraway merchant or admiral. And so the cycle began. The ship hunted targets. A lookout spotted sails. The crew prepared for chase or battle. And somewhere in the captain's cabin, a map, real or imagined, promised that the next prize might be the one to make everyone rich enough to retire in style. Spoiler, that day rarely came. You might think that once you became a pirate, life transformed into a permanent Caribbean vacation. White sand beaches, fresh seafood, endless rum. Reality? More like damp wood, questionable meat, and an intimate relationship with scurvy. The pirate diet was built for storage, not flavor. You ate what could survive weeks or months at sea without refrigeration. That meant salted beef and pork, so heavily salted that before cooking, you had to soak the meat for hours to make it chewable. Even then, it was like gnawing on a wet plank. Ship's biscuit, not a biscuit in the fluffy, buttery sense, but a rock-hard slab of flour and water baked until it could survive the apocalypse. Often infested with weevils. Pirates learned to tap the biscuit to knock the bugs out. Extra protein if you didn't bother. Dried peas, beans and rice, cheap, filling and dull. Beer or rum, safer to drink than water. Mixed with water as grog to stretch supplies. Fresh food, fruit, vegetables, fish was a rare luxury, usually eaten right after a raid or while anchored near shore. Otherwise, the menu leaned toward edible in the loosest sense. Hygiene, the romanticized horror. Ships were floating petri dishes. Bathing? Only if you got caught in the rain or jumped overboard, which was risky in shark-infested waters. Clothes were rarely washed. Lice, fleas, and rats thrived in the dark corners of the ship. Toilets? The head was a simple plank with a hole, hanging over the side near the bow. In rough seas, aiming was an extreme sport, and because the head was exposed, using it could be a quick way to get very, very wet. Infections were constant companions. A small cut could turn deadly without treatment, and dental care was non-existent. Many pirates lost teeth early and were in constant pain. This is why grinning like a movie pirate was less common. Smiling just showed off the rot. Sleep, if you could call it that. Pirates slept in shifts, often in hammocks slung below deck. The air was thick with heat, sweat, and the smell of wet rope. Rats skittered overhead. Space was so tight that rolling over in your sleep risked an elbow in the ribs from your neighbor. Above all, you slept lightly. At any moment, the lookout might shout, "Sail ho!" and you'd be expected on deck, ready to haul lines or man the guns. The articles, democracy with a cutlass. One of the most surprising truths about pirate life was how democratic it could be, at least compared to the Navy or merchant service. Pirate crews often drew up articles, written agreements every man swore to follow. Articles varied from ship to ship, but usually covered how loot would be divided, shares for captain, quartermaster, and crew, compensation for injuries, losing a right arm equals 600 pieces of eight, rules about gambling, bringing women aboard, or fighting among crew, lights out times to keep discipline and readiness. Breaking the articles meant punishment, fines, loss of rations, flogging, or in extreme cases, marooning. Leadership, captains and quartermasters. In the Navy, a captain's word was law. On a pirate ship, the captain was often elected and could be replaced if the crew lost confidence in him. His role was to lead in battle, make tactical calls, and inspire fear or respect in targets. The quartermaster held equal importance, handling day-to-day discipline, dividing loot, and representing the crew's interests. If a captain got too greedy or reckless, the quartermaster could call for a vote to replace him. This system wasn't born from idealism. It was survival. A crew that trusted their leaders fought harder, sailed faster, and stayed together longer. Entertainment and morale. Life at sea was monotonous. To pass the time, pirates sang sea shanties, played dice or cards, and swapped exaggerated tales of past adventures. Music was common. Fiddles, drums, and flutes salvaged from captured ships. Some captains encouraged gambling, others banned it to avoid fights. But storytelling was universal. A good yarn could make a cold, wet nights seem warmer. Of course, morale could vanish quickly. Long stretches without prize ships led to restlessness. When food spoiled and rum ran out, even the best-run crew might start whispering about mutiny. A pirate's life might have been about freedom, but freedom is hard to maintain without the right tools. And for pirates, the most important tool wasn't the cutlass or the pistol. It was the ship. Without a fast, reliable vessel, you weren't a pirate. You were just an angry man with a sword and no transportation. Choosing the right ship. Hollywood loves the big, menacing galleon bristling with cannons. Real pirates? They preferred speed over size. Why? Because pirates didn't want fair fights. They wanted to catch targets quickly and get away before the Navy could respond. The most popular ships were sloops, small, fast, and agile, could sail in shallow waters to escape larger ships, ideal for hit-and-run attacks. Schooners, sleek and quick, with multiple sails for speed and maneuverability. Brigantines, a good balance of speed and firepower, big enough to carry more crew and loot, but still nimble. Sometimes pirates captured large ships and converted them for their own use, stripping down heavy structures to make them lighter and faster. Modifications for mischief. Once a ship was liberated, pirates customized it. Extra cannons, cramming in as much firepower as the hull could handle. Larger crews, more hands for boarding, more guns for intimidation. Hidden compartments, for storing loot or contraband. Paint jobs, darkened hulls for stealth at night. It was less about aesthetics and more about function. A flashy paint job was nice, but outrunning a naval frigate was nicer. The Jolly Roger, branding at sea. The most famous pirate's skull and crossbones, the classic. Hourglass, time is running out. Red flag, no quarter, no mercy will be given. Flying the Jolly Roger was a calculated choice. Pirates often approached with a false flag, posing as a friendly merchant, then hoisted their colors at the last moment. The sudden switch was meant to shock victims into surrender before a shot was fired. Weapons, up close and personal. Contrary to popular belief, pirates didn't rely on heavy naval battles. Cannons were used to disable a ship's sails or rudder, not to sink it. After all, you can't loot a ship at the bottom of the sea. Once alongside their target, pirates switched to personal weapons. Cutlasses short, curved swords ideal for close quarters fighting. Flintlock pistols, powerful but slow to reload. Pirates often carried several. Boarding axes for hacking through rigging or less pleasantly through people. Grenados, small bombs filled with powder and shrapnel, tossed to create chaos. The goal was to overwhelm, not to slaughter. Dead men don't carry valuables, but frightened men hand them over quickly. Fear as a business model. A pirate's best weapon wasn't steel, it was reputation. If a captain became known for cruelty, ships might surrender at the mere sight of his flag. Blackbeard mastered this. He lit slow-burning fuses in his beard, surrounding himself with smoke, so in battle he looked like something that had crawled out of hell. Not all pirates relied on terror. Some, like Calico Jack Rackham, preferred style, wearing brightly colored clothes, letting the image of a bold, romantic outlaw do the work. But whether through fear or charm, the point was the same. Make targets give up without a fight. Piracy, like theater, thrives on characters. Some pirates became so infamous that their names still echo centuries later, wrapped in myths, half-truths, and a healthy dose of exaggeration. But behind every legend was a real human being, clever, ruthless, and often far less glamorous than the stories suggest. Edward Teach, Blackbeard. If pirates had a celebrity hall of fame, Edward Teach would be on the cover of every issue. Blackbeard's fame wasn't built on an endless string of bloody victories. It was built on image. Standing tall, with a dark, thick beard, reportedly tied into ribbons, Blackbeard added theater to intimidation. Before a battle, he would tuck slow-burning fuses under his hat and light them, surrounding his face with a halo of smoke. Imagine facing that on the deck of your merchant ship. He looked like the devil had come for your cargo personally. Despite his fearsome look, Blackbeard wasn't a mindless killer. He preferred surrender over a fight, knowing a dead crew couldn't help him load loot. His career was short, barely 2 years as a pirate. But in that time, he captured the French slave ship La Concorde, turned it into his flagship Queen Anne's Revenge, and blockaded Charleston, South Carolina. His end came in 1718, in a fierce battle with Royal Navy forces. Blackbeard was shot 5 times, stabbed more than 20, and still kept fighting until he was beheaded. His head was hung from a Navy ship's bowsprit as a warning, though legend says his headless body swam around the ship before sinking. Because pirates, apparently, never settle for a normal ending. And Bonny and Mary Red, the deadly duo, if pirate life was hard for men, it was twice as dangerous for women. Yet, and Bonny and Mary Red carved their names in a history as two of the fiercest pirates of the Caribbean. And Bonny was born in Ireland but moved to the Bahamas, where she met Calico Jack Rackham. Disguising herself as a man, she joined his crew. Along the way, she met Mary Red, another woman dressed as a man to survive at sea. The two became close allies, and according to some stories, close friends in other ways as well. Their reputation grew quickly. They fought in boarding actions, cursed as well as any sailor, and were said to be more savage in battle than many of their male crewmates. When Rackham's ship was captured in 1720, most of the crew cowered below deck, drunk. Bonny and Reed fought on until they were overwhelmed. At trial, both women pleaded the belly, claiming they were pregnant, which delayed execution. Mary Red died in prison, likely of fever, and Bonny's fate is uncertain. Some say she was released and lived quietly. Others say she returned to piracy. Either way, she sailed into legend. Bartholomew Roberts, Blackbeard. If piracy were measured by success, Bartholomew Roberts might be the most effective pirate of them all. Over his career, he captured more than 400 ships, far surpassing many of his famous peers. Roberts wasn't a drunken brawler. He dressed elegantly, wore a red silk waistcoat in battle, and preferred discipline on his ship. His crew followed a strict code: no gambling, no bringing women aboard, and lights out by 8 o'clock. But when it came to his enemies, Roberts showed no mercy. In 1722, off the coast of West Africa, Roberts faced the British warship Swallow. He was killed by grape shot to the throat. His men, honoring his wish never to be taken alive, threw his body overboard. The Swallow captured his crew, ending one of the most profitable and terrifying pirate careers in history. The ones time forgot. For every famous pirate, there were dozens whose names faded into obscurity. They didn't have flashy nicknames or dramatic deaths. They robbed a few ships, lived hard, and died harder, either at sea or at the end of a rope. Yet they were the backbone of piracy, the sailors who made the legends possible. Pirates lived fast and took risks because they knew one thing. When your luck ran out, it didn't just run. It dove overboard and swam for shore. And once the authorities got hold of you, the ending was rarely romantic. When the noose came calling, the most common punishment for piracy was hanging. It was public, deliberate, and meant to scare others off the trade. In major port cities, gallows were often built right on the waterfront so the bodies of executed pirates could be seen by every incoming ship. Sometimes the authorities went a step further. After hanging, a pirate's corpse might be covered in tar and placed in a metal cage, then hung from a gibbet at the harbor entrance. The idea was that the sun-blackened remains, swaying in the wind, would be the ultimate do not enter sign for aspiring pirates. The trial process was swift. Pirates captured by naval forces were taken to the nearest major colony, Port Royal, Boston, London, where they were tried en masse. Witnesses were often ship captains who had been robbed, or even former pirate crew members who'd been promised leniency in exchange for testimony. Few escaped conviction. Even the faintest whiff of piracy could be enough for a death sentence. Myths that died on the gallows. Punishment wasn't just physical. It was about crushing the romantic image of the pirate. Governments wanted the world to believe pirates were lawless savages with short, ugly careers, not daring adventurers. Some of the most enduring pirate myths were, ironically, government-sponsored. The drunken, lazy pirate. While alcohol was common, most successful pirates ran tight, disciplined ships. Drunken chaos was a quick way to get caught or killed. The constantly bloodthirsty killer. Violence was a tool, not a lifestyle. Most pirates wanted loot, not corpses, and preferred surrender over battle. The treasure-burying rogue. Governments leaned into this myth later, feeding the public's hunger for tales of mystery and greed. It made for good stories, but bad history. By shaping these images, authorities hoped to make piracy look foolish and suicidal rather than clever and profitable. The beginning of the end. The Golden Age of Piracy didn't end overnight. It was strangled by a combination of politics, economics, and firepower. By the early 18th century, navies grew stronger. Britain, Spain, France, and the Netherlands poured resources into their warships. Faster, better-armed vessels patrolled the major trade routes. Colonial cooperation. Governors began working together to share intelligence and coordinate anti-pirate campaigns, closing safe harbors. Bounties and pardons. Some pirates accepted royal pardons to escape execution. Others betrayed rivals for reward money. Big names fell one by one. Blackbeard in 1718, Calico Jack in 1720, Bartholomew Roberts in 1722. Without their leadership and reputations to rally crews, piracy lost much of its bite. By the 1730s, large-scale piracy in the Caribbean was effectively over. Smaller outbreaks continued in other parts of the world, but the age of the Jolly Roger as a constant threat to empires was gone. Legacy in the wake. Ironically, once pirates were no longer a threat, the world grew fascinated with them. Plays, novels, and later films turned them into lovable rogues, charming rebels, and treasure hunters. The brutal reality of shipboard life, the stink, the hunger, the constant threat of death, was washed away in favor of adventure, gold, and romance. In truth, pirates were both ruthless thieves and daring sailors, criminals and visionaries, men and women who gambled everything for freedom and fortune on the high seas. Life aboard a pirate ship didn't run on the same clock as life on land. There were no shops opening at 9, no polite tea breaks, and no weekends off. Instead, your day was carved into watches driven by wind, weather, and whatever opportunity or trouble the sea tossed your way. Morning watch, rising with the sun and the smell. Dawn on a pirate ship was less about chirping birds and golden rays, and more about being woken by the creak of timbers, the slap of waves, and the not-so-delicate scent of 80 unwashed men in close quarters. If you were lucky, you got a full stretch of sleep in your hammock. If not, you've been up half the night on duty, keeping watch for sails or changes in the weather. The first task of the day? Swabbing the decks. Yes, pirates still cleaned. Salt water was sloshed across the planks, scrubbed with holy stones to keep the wood from rotting. The work was monotonous, but it kept the ship and your feet healthier. Breakfast followed. Ship's biscuit and maybe salted meat or cheese, washed down with watered rum. You didn't linger over it. Meals were quick, eaten on your feet or sitting cross-legged on the deck. Mid-morning, keeping the ship alive. A pirate ship was like a living creature, and keeping it fed meant constant maintenance. Sails needed patching, rope splicing, and rigging checked. If you weren't skilled in carpentry or sail making, you might be set to scrape barnacles off the hull. A miserable job done from a small boat alongside the ship, with the added thrill of knowing sharks might be circling. If there were prisoners from a recent capture, guards kept watch over them, making sure none got ideas about mutiny or sabotage. Loot from the last raid might be inventoried and stored. Cloth bales stacked, barrels secured, coins counted. Noon, the lookout's cry. Midday was the quietest time, unless the lookout shouted the magic words, "Sail ho!" At that cry, The entire ship shifted gears. The captain and quartermaster rushed to the deck to gauge the target. Was it a fat merchant ship, a Navy frigate, or just another pirate looking for trouble? Orders snapped down the line. Sails trimmed. Cannons primed. The crew readied for chase or braced for a fight. If nothing appeared, the midday bell marked a ration of rum and a short break, though breaks often meant more work. Mending clothes, sharpening cutlasses, cleaning pistols. Afternoon, drills, discipline, and dice. A smart captain drilled his crew regularly. Cannons had to be loaded and fired fast. Boarding lines had to be dropped smoothly. Every man needed to know his station. The faster a pirate ship could act, the more likely it was to win without bloodshed. Discipline on a pirate ship was not the lash-happy tyranny of a navy, but rules were enforced. Fines or loss of rations were common punishments for breaking the articles. Quarrels were settled quickly, sometimes with fists, sometimes with dice. When the work was done, afternoons could be surprisingly social. Pirates gambled with coins, shells, or even personal possessions. Stories flowed, true ones, exaggerated ones, and ones so wildly impossible you knew they were for entertainment only. Evening, sunset preparations. As the sun dipped, the crew prepared for night sailing. Lanterns were kept to a minimum. Too much light risked giving away your position. The watch was set. Half the crew slept, half stayed awake. Sails were adjusted for the wind, and weapons kept ready in case of a nighttime encounter. Dinner, if you could call it that, might be pea soup, boiled rice, or more salted meat. If luck had been good, fresh fish or stolen fruit might appear on the menu. And of course, another ration of rum. Night, the long hours. Night on the open sea was both beautiful and unsettling. Stars blazed overhead, the water dark and endless. For the watch crew, it was hours of scanning the horizon, adjusting sails, and listening for the distant thump of enemy oars or the creak of another ship's hull. Below deck, the off-duty crew tried to sleep in hammocks that swung with the swell. Snoring mixed with the scuttle of rats and the occasional groan of the timbers. The air was thick, hot in summer, freezing in winter, but exhaustion usually did the trick. And so the cycle repeated. Work, watch, eat, drink, sleep, punctuated by moments of intense violence and chaos when a target appeared. A pirate's life was rarely idle. Even in calm seas, the next day could bring a prize, or a storm, or the gallows. The sea is a strange place. It can be calm and glassy one moment, then a roaring monster the next. For sailors, pirate or otherwise, this unpredictability bred a deep respect for forces they couldn't control. And when you live in a world where your life depends on the whims of wind and wave, superstition isn't just a pastime. It's survival. The rules you didn't break. Every pirate ship had its own version of taboo. Things you simply did not do unless you wanted the whole crew glaring at you like you just invited a storm aboard. No whistling on deck. Whistling was said to call the wind. In calm weather, that might be welcome. But if the breeze was already strong, a whistle was practically a dare for a storm to smash your masts. No women aboard. The most famous maritime superstition. Women were said to anger the sea, bringing bad luck. The irony? Some of the fiercest pirates in history, and Bonny and Mary Red, were women in disguise, and the ships they sailed on did just fine. No naming the ship on Friday. Fridays were thought unlucky for setting sail or renaming a vessel. Some pirates wouldn't even load cargo on that day. The sea has eyes and ears. Pirates often believed the sea was a living force, watching, listening, and keeping score. This meant showing respect, tossing coins overboard, an offering to the sea before a long voyage, to pay for safe passage. Speaking to the wind. Some sailors swore they could talk, a breeze into life, whispering into the sails or masts. respecting the albatross. Seeing an albatross was a good omen. Killing one was unthinkable, believed to bring storms or death. Tattoos, charms, and talismans. Many pirates wore charms for protection. These weren't just for show, they were portable prayers. Anchors symbolized stability and a safe return. Swallows, one for each 5,000 nautical miles sailed, believed to guide you home. Crosses or crucifixes, worn or carved into the mast to ward off evil. Some pirates carried personal talismans, a lucky coin, a carved piece of driftwood, or even a small pouch of dirt from their homeland. Singing to the sea. Music wasn't only for morale, it was magical thinking. Sea shanties had rhythms designed to match the work being done, but some were also sung to keep the sea calm or charm the sails. A wrong note in a certain song might be met with curses, not at the singer, but the fate they might have just tempted. Death in the deep. Pirates had their own beliefs about what happened when you died at sea. Some thought drowning meant your soul would wander the ocean forever unless given a proper burial on land. Others believed the ocean claimed you entirely, body and spirit, making you part of its eternal tide. This is one reason some pirates wore gold earrings. The metal was supposed to pay for a burial if their body ever washed ashore. Whether anyone actually spent that gold on funerals is questionable. Even the fiercest pirate crew couldn't live forever on the open sea. Ships needed repairs, barrels needed refilling, and men needed the kind of entertainment you simply couldn't find in a hammock below deck. That's where pirate ports came in. Half safe haven, half danger zone. Port Royal, the wickedest city on earth. If there was ever a place that captured the wild spirit of the Golden Age of Piracy, it was Port Royal, Jamaica. In the late 17th century, this British colonial port became a pirate's dream. Bustling markets, taverns open all hours, and authorities who looked the other way, so long as you spent your stolen gold in town. At its peak, Port Royal was a stew of sailors, merchants, privateers, and outright criminals. Ships came in loaded with sugar, slaves, and silver, and left carrying rum, weapons, and trouble. The brothels and bars lined up along the waterfront did roaring business. It was said there were more taverns than houses, and more money flowing than the dock could hold. But in 1692, an earthquake and tsunami destroyed much of the city, swallowing buildings and people into the sea. Survivors claimed it was divine punishment for the city's sins. Pirates saw it more as an unfortunate business interruption. Nassau, the pirate republic. By the early 1700s, the Bahamian island of New Providence had turned into a de facto pirate republic, with Nassau as its heart. Colonial governors abandoned it, leaving the harbor open to any ship bold enough to sail in. At one point, it's estimated that over 1,000 pirates called Nassau home, including Blackbeard and Calico Jack Rackham. Here, pirates set their own rules. Loot was traded openly. Ships were repaired without awkward questions about their previous owners. Crews drank and gambled side by side, swapping news of which routes were ripe for plunder. For a brief moment, Nassau felt like freedom itself, until 1718, when the British sent Governor Woodes Rogers to clean house. His slogan, "Piracy expelled, commerce restored." Many pirates accepted his pardons. Others fled or fought. Nassau's pirate republic was short-lived, but burned brightly in memory. Tortuga, the French freebooter haven. Off the coast of Hispaniola lay Tortuga, a small island with a big reputation. In the 17th century, it was a stronghold for French buccaneers, hunters-turned-pirates who raided Spanish shipping in the Caribbean. Tortuga's steep hills and hidden coves made it easy to defend, while its taverns made it easy to lose track of your pay. Here, alliances shifted like the tides. Today you might drink with a man. Tomorrow you might board his ship in battle. But so long as the rum flowed, grudges could wait. Madagascar, the far-off pirate paradise. Not all pirate havens were in the Caribbean. In the Indian Ocean, the island of Madagascar became a hideout for pirates raiding the lucrative trade routes between Africa, India, and the East Indies. Some pirates even claimed to have set up their own settlements there, marrying local women and living like chieftains. Whether these tales were truth or a tall story, Madagascar's remoteness made it perfect for disappearing from the reach of European navies. The double-edged sword of shore leave. Ports were a necessity, but they were also a trap. Rum loosened lips, and spies for colonial governors listened for loose talk about ship movements or hidden loot. Rival crews might brawl in the streets, settling old scores. And a drunken pirate was an easy target for bounty hunters. Still, the ports are where pirate legends were born, where tales grew taller with every retelling, where the next crew was recruited, and where the scent of salt, tar, and danger mixed with that of roasting meat and spilled ale. Every era of outlaw glory eventually meets its match, and for the pirates of the Golden Age, the 1720s and 1730s were the years when the noose tightened. The same oceans that once felt wide and ungovernable began to shrink under the shadow of disciplined, determined naval power. Governments decide they've had enough. For decades, piracy had been a nuisance that empires sometimes tolerated, sometimes encouraged, especially when the victims were rival nations. But as trade networks matured and colonial economies became more profitable, piracy went from a tolerable side effect of empire to a direct threat to wealth and stability. Britain, France, Spain, and the Netherlands all began devoting serious resources to wiping pirates out. Warships that once patrolled coastlines now hunted pirates across oceans. Colonial governors were ordered to offer no safe harbor. Courts were instructed to give no mercy. The war on pirate havens. The crackdown began with the destruction of pirate strongholds. In 1718, Britain sent Governor Woodes Rogers to Nassau with a fleet and a mission: either pardon pirates or hang them. Some, like Benjamin Hornigold, accepted pardons and even turned pirate hunter. Others, like Charles Vane, refused, slipping away to continue raiding until the law caught up. In Jamaica, Port Royal's days as a pirate haven were long gone after the 1692 earthquake. Now, it was a staging ground for anti-pirate operations. In the Indian Ocean, French and British forces targeted Madagascar and the Comoros, cutting off hideouts far from Europe's gaze. Famous last stands. Many of the names we remember met their ends in this final push. Blackbeard fell in 1718 at Ocracoke Inlet, North Carolina, after a brutal hand-to-hand fight with Royal Navy Lieutenant Robert Maynard. Teach took at least 5 bullets and over 20 sword wounds before going down. Calico Jack Rackham was captured in 1720. His trial is remembered less for him than for Bonny's famous remark: "If you had fought like a man, you need not have been hanged like a dog." Bartholomew Roberts, the most successful pirate by sheer captures, died in 1722 off the coast of West Africa when grape shot from HMS Swallow struck him in the throat. His crew honored his wish never to be taken alive by burying him at sea. These deaths weren't just symbolic, they were practical. Removing charismatic leaders shattered crews, scattering the survivors. The rise of the bounty and the pardon. Governments realized they didn't have to fight every pirate. They could turn pirates against each other. Royal proclamations offered pardons to any pirate who surrendered within a set time frame, often with full amnesty for past crimes. For those who ignored the offer, bounties were placed on their heads. This carrot and stick approach worked. Crews split apart as some took the deal and others ran. Suspicion and betrayal replaced the brotherhood of the Black Flag. Shifting trade routes. Another nail in the coffin was geography itself. Merchants and navies adapted their routes, favoring heavily patrolled waters and faster ships. The easy pickings of the early 1700s dried up. Risk began to outweigh reward, and fewer new recruits joined the life. By the mid-1730s, large-scale piracy in the Caribbean and Atlantic was nearly gone. Smaller outbreaks persisted in the Indian Ocean and along the Barbary coast, but the Golden Age was over. The Jolly Roger still flew now and then, but more as a desperate bluff than a promise of glory, from outlaw to legend. Ironically, once the danger passed, the stories began to grow. Playwrights, pamphleteers, and later novelists reshaped pirates into romantic rebels, clever rogues, or swashbuckling adventurers. Reality, the hunger, disease, and short lifespans, was quietly set aside. By the 19th century, the pirate of memory was no longer a man hunted by navies. He was a symbol of freedom, defiance, and the lure of the unknown. That image still sails today, its sails filled by the winds of myth. When the last great pirate ships vanished from the oceans in the mid-18th century, they left behind no empire, no flag planted in victory, no enduring kingdom. What they left instead was a shadow, a strange, stubborn legacy that still lingers in our culture, our language, and even in the modern-day oceans. The pirate in our language. Everyday speech carries pieces of the pirate's world. 3 sheets to the wind, meaning drunk, comes from loose sails flapping in chaos. No quarter, offering no mercy, a direct echo of the red flag once flown in battle. Hoist the colors, raising the ship's flag, now used metaphorically for rallying to a cause. Booty, still meaning loot or treasure, though today it's often used differently. These phrases outlive the men who coined them, slipping into the common tongue until their origins blurred. Pirates in popular culture. From the moment piracy declined, it became safe to romanticize. By the 19th century, pirates had transformed into folk heroes and villains in equal measure. Writers like Robert Louis Stevenson, Treasure Island, and Jan Barrie, Peter Pan, shaped the modern image. Buried treasure, flamboyant clothes, and the art growl. In the 20th and 21st centuries, films, TV shows, and games carried that myth forward. Douglas Fairbanks, Errol Flynn, and later Johnny Depp gave us pirates who were witty, charming, and somehow always had access to hair product. The truth, that most pirates were poor, smelled terrible, and spent more time waiting than fighting, rarely makes it to the screen. But the fantasy lives on because it speaks to something deeper, the human craving for freedom and adventure. The symbol of the black flag, the Jolly Roger, still has power. It's flown by rebel groups, painted on skateboards, stitched onto jackets. It represents defiance against authority, even when the people flying it have nothing to do with the sea. The skull and crossbones remains one of the most instantly recognizable symbols on Earth. In some circles, it's a badge of honor. In others, a warning. Either way, it endures, proof that an image born from fear has survived as a symbol of thrill. Piracy never really died. While the Golden Age ended centuries ago, piracy didn't vanish. Modern pirates still operate off the coasts of Somalia, in the Strait of Malacca, and in parts of West Africa. Their weapons are AK-47s instead of cutlasses. Their ships are fast motorboats instead of sloops, but the goals are the same. Take what isn't yours and get away before the law catches up. These modern pirates are far from romantic. They target cargo ships, fishing vessels, and sometimes even private yachts, holding crews for ransom. And like their historical counterparts, they thrive where law enforcement is weak and the payoff is worth the risk. The pirate's true legacy. Perhaps the most lasting thing pirates gave us is the reminder that power isn't always in the hands of kings and governments. For a brief time, men and women who had nothing, no land, no noble title, no legal standing, took control of their own fate on the open sea. They built floating societies with their own rules, their own justice, their own ideas of freedom. It was brutal, short-lived, and often ugly, but it was real. And maybe that's why we keep coming back to the pirate's image. Beneath the costumes and cliches lies a truth that refuses to sink. The sea belongs to no one, and for those willing to risk everything, it can still offer a kind of freedom the land never will. And so, the tide of history turned. The sails of the last great pirate ships disappeared over the horizon, leaving behind no lasting kingdom. Only stories, symbols, and shadows. The pirates of the Golden Age were not heroes, not really. They were thieves and fighters, gamblers and survivors. But for a moment, they dared to live by no law but their own. Perhaps that's why their legend endures. Because deep down, we still feel the pull of that endless horizon, the call of a life untethered, the dream that somewhere out there, the sea might still belong to those bold enough to claim it.